Berengaria de Navarre, virtuous but plain, subjected but defiant. Berengaria de Navarre, the humble Queen of England as she signed herself, never set foot in the country she was crowned Queen of, nor spoke the language. The marks of her crown still impressed on her skull. An oddity how her legacy has affected concept, myth, history and architecture from her brief passing through Cyprus 800 years ago, where she wed her king, Richard the Lionheart, after he conquered the island in an accidental anomaly in 1191. An anxious tale invites the audience to immerse themselves into this visual and sensory formation of the Berengaria project. Fantasy and reality interlink simultaneously, almost as if in perfect rhythm. A perception of fostering ideas can strike us as familiar and comforting. We go so far as finding ourselves almost experiencing this pain of desertion, subjection, and defiance to what is rightfully ours. Upon closer inspection, the mythical appearances are eliminated, and their place taken by a darkened reality. Dismantle an idol, a disturbing hostility of an underlying patina scars the eyes. Focusing on multiple perspectives of the Berengaria narrative, our findings led us in questioning how we relate to our history and heritage. Is the Berengaria effect a case of our historic or cultural heritage of identities and fundamental elements within our local living environment? Or does it emanate rather from a dysfunctional reference of conflict heritage? Has this aspect of our heritage ever deeply concerned us at all? The architectural identities of the project focused on how architectural and spatial composition evolves into a recognizable shape. Engaging with it, we build a relationship. Engaging with it through Berengaria de Navarre, we build the multiple dimension of this relationship.
Spatial recognition is a cognitive function, one that is directly linked to our primal survival instincts. To express our relation to space, we process the elements that describe its form, the outline that includes and reduces all its qualities and characteristics. We make up its image. How we experience it is greatly subjective. Human behavior is defined by action, which in turn is defined by external stimuli. This creates different findings for each individual as a result. Each space we navigate through provides opportunity for experiences and behavioral activity distinctive for each one of us. Therefore, the definition of form also includes psychological and ideological dimensions. It is necessary for an established common code to exist in society in order to make these dimensions clear in any form of communication. We all know what an apple looks, tastes, and smells like, but do we all like it the same? Common codes of communication have become acceptable in our societies through time and common geographical space and function as a bridge for understanding. They actually help shape space, transforming it into a comprehensible and expansive whole. This functions as the dynamic that transforms an ordinary geographical location to locus, the unique and ecumenical relationship between a specific location and the structures that exist in it. It possesses a specific identity, character, and atmosphere, and it is impossible to change any of these attributes without completely changing its identity. An extension of this concept is the genius loci, the deity that superintended and cared for a specific location in ancient times and played a vital role in raising structures. The concept of the genius loci was based on the principle of understanding space and attempting to describe it as form. This has been passed on in our DNA through time as our need to seek out the optimum location, the one with the most beautiful views, the perfect dimensions, the best climate, etc. This is how we first began to create cities. Who we were and how we identified ourselves in the world was evident in how our cities were structured and how they appeared. Wealth, religion, power, and intellect, or lack thereof, created the character of our built habitat. In a few thousand years, our simple and primitive dwellings evolved into symbols of status, ornamented and equipped with luxuries never before required. The outline of our built environment declared our identity. The most recognizable form of outline is the skyline. Most of us recognize the skylines of London, Paris, or Athens. Cityscapes, natural landmarks, and monuments are interwoven in the image we have of our cities with symbols that survive time and are most familiar to us. This is what makes up their identity. Layers upon layers of history assemble our cityscapes and map out the spatial forms we use. Certain elements stand out which have a primary role in how we move about in space, such as monuments, landmarks, places that personally affect us, sacred locations, etc. They affect our behavior whether we realize it or not. The Limassol Castle, which today houses the Cyprus Medieval Museum, has a historical link to Berengaria of Navarre. According to historians, Richard the Lionheart, on the Third Crusade to recapture the Holy Land, wed Berengaria of Navarre in St. George's Chapel in 1191. The chapel will later be integrated in the castle. The castle has a rectangular shape consisting of many levels. A two-story square structure on the south side is reminiscent of the tower in Colossi Castle, another important Crusader monument of the Frankish era of the island dating it back to 1210. Another two-story rectangular building was later added on, creating a more symmetrical shape of the castle. The whole building is constructed with local stone, with the width of the walls almost 2 meters. It is not clear when exactly the castle was built, but historic sources date it back to the Byzantine era. It is believed that it was built on top of a Paleo-Christian church, 4th to 7th century AD, and a Meso-Byzantine monument, 10th, 11th century AD. Other findings tell of the existence of a primal Latin cathedral. According to records of Etienne de Lusignan, a scholar and titular bishop of Venetian Cyprus, the castle was built in 1193 by Guy de Lusignan, and first official reports of it were dated back to 1228. This is why monuments are primary elements in man-made environments. They consist of an art form which is charged with memory and have greater value than the location itself. They endure because they possess a dialectical position in our lives. Through the architectural identities of the Berengaria project, this concept was very eloquently manifested using the examples of 3 structures that have a powerful architectural identity: the Limassol Castle, the Berengaria village in Polemidia, and the Hotel Berengaria in Prodromos. Creatives composed works based on their rendition of any of the structures, or all of them in effect with Queen Berengaria of Navarre. Identifying the composition and character of a specific location, structure, or element can be interpreted in 3 main levels. Sensory levels, which can be experienced personally or through descriptions. The visuals, forms, and sounds when visiting these locations or when viewing footage of them inspired sensory renditions for the artists, resulting in works such as the music for the Berengaria project composed by Tassos Papamichail, which is in itself a sensory interpretation, a description in sound. Emotional levels, which can be experienced through documented impressions or situations. Identifying elements in history of Berengaria's marriage to the king, her relation to the castle of Limassol, and interpreting the emotions that it generated, inspired She Did Not Know Which One to Choose by Rokaskani, a feeling of restlessness and uncertainty in a life marked by subjection and defiance. Mental levels, which can be experienced through interpretation and comprehension. The way we experience space is linked to our interpretation of it. Impression, memory, and sensitivity are deeper levels of our reaction to it. The Real Absence by Spiros Agathou is a product of memory, focusing on its duality and duration through multiple dimensions. Each form also holds the impression of both psychological and ethical behaviors it supports. Memory and emotion transfers. We can experience similar sensitivities in space relevant to our own interpretation. The vibes of an old spinning mill, the Baumwollspinnerei in Leipzig, have generated the same impressions as this narrative of Berengaria had, an uncomfortable quietness of solitude evident in Berengaria, Queen of Loneliness by Penny Monoyou.
Baumwollspinnerei in Leipzig, Germany. A unique place not only for Germany but across Europe, the spinning mill. Located in the western part of Leipzig during the GDR period, it was considered one of the most successful production sites for cotton yarn, which continues its legacy to the present day. The area has become one of the busiest cultural sites. With the motto "From Cotton to Culture", the Baumwollspinnerei stands for the groundbreaking success of the New Leipzig School and Neo-Rauch, but also for its unique industrial architecture, both in terms of size and conservation. The history of the Spinnerei begins with a vision by Dr. Karl Heine, a lawyer and industrialist, towards the end of the 19th century. He saw the potential of the Maschland in the west of Leipzig, wanted to make it arable. By 1885, the spinning mill was operating at full strength with 30,000 self-acting spindles and other related equipment. In the years up to 1907, further spinning mills, combers, production halls and administration buildings were built. The Leipzig Baumwollspinnerei grew to become the largest spinning mill in Europe during these years. War, inflation, and social unrest do not leave the company unscathed. Falling under their Nazi influence, the Baumwollspinnerei was used to make their military uniforms. In 1946, it became a state-owned company. With the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and the new state of affairs, the yarn production in the Baumwollspinnerei ends. Artists move into the cheaply rented rooms until the place opens for sale in 2000. Again, it is thanks to a vision that allows the Baumwollspinnerei to blossom. Bertram Schulze, who was one of the first tenants as a furniture designer, sees the potential of this place and develops the idea of turning it into a cultural location. In spite of much resistance, he implements his plan. Several artists, workshops and galleries move in. Just a few years later, the spinning mill became the new hotspot of the international art scene, when Neo-Rauch and some young painters were chosen as the superstars of the New Leipzig School and shook up the art scene. Suddenly, collectors from all over the world flock in to buy artworks. Now, twice a year, approximately 25,000 people come to the famous Rundgang Gallery tour when all the studios, workshops and galleries open. The Baumwollspinnerei is a fascinating industrial building and cultural site alike. LIA, the Leipzig International Art Program, moved in the Spinnerei in 2008. It is an art residency that accommodates international artists, offering them the opportunity to live and work in these amazing rooms of the old factory. In February 2018, I was accepted to spend 2 months on the LIA program. I immediately felt the energy of the building, its character. The green double door under the glass canopy from the turn of the century is open. Time stands still. The industrial building, as an ambassador of the industrial culture within the city, combines minimalism and simplicity with the warmth that rises from the red bricks of which the building is made of. The photographer couple Bernd and Hila Becher named these industrial buildings anonymous sculptures to indicate their artistic quality. Baumwollspinnerei is one of these sculptures hidden in the west of Leipzig. The construction quality is outstanding. In the last century, cotton spinning mills were generally built to last. They were built to maintain a constant temperature of 23 degrees during thread production for superior thread quality. This explained the building's solid masonry over a meter thick, its large cast iron box windows, its cork insulation and roofs overgrown with chives. The rooms in the Spinnerei are imposing. They are huge with high ceilings, and this creates an immediate feeling of coldness and aloneness. But not loneliness, because this enormous building houses 150 artist studios and 14 galleries. Even though you're always surrounded by people, the size of the building gives you the feeling of being in the epicenter of your own cosmos. Artists enjoy being in isolation, sometimes in physical, social isolation, sometimes in spiritual isolation. The sight of the Spinnerei gives you this exact feeling of being isolated, alone in these rooms, just you and your thoughts, a feeling that triggers your inner creativity. The windows are one of the striking characteristics of the factory. With their enormous size, they become the windows to the building's soul, the connection of the isolated artist to the outside world. Each morning, they allow the sun to come into every room and bring to life all the colors of the painting. It's like a vivid fairy tale that ends with a sunrise when the light reflects on the red bricks and offers its warmth generously. The vibes of the building's architecture and the fact that over the years thousands of people have passed through these rooms, working here under various circumstances, naturally affected my work. During my time in Lille, I produced a series of portraits showing isolated characters sitting near the typical window of the Baumwollspinnerei and with unreadable, distorted faces. I wasn't the only artist of the residency that was affected by or included the architecture of the factory in their work. New York performer Margot Greb turned the big windows and the high ceilings into her asset and made them part of her performances. Also, the Chilean artist Catalina Bauer produced a series of 4 video performances that referred to the building, its architecture and history, both past and present, inspired by a dream. The work is titled, "I Dreamed I Was a Spinning Mill." This source of inspiration was the reason why Jana Zolaki invited me to create an artwork based on her conceptual creation of the project Berengaria on subjection and defiance. She was aware of the residency, about the building, the environment, and Leipzig's art scene. The words subjection and defiance, as well as isolation and the Baumwollspinnerei, found an immediate connection in my head. In a factory where working conditions were harsh, where the women that worked there had to bend down constantly to retie threads, the machines were very loud, the air was hot, dusty and sticky, and the working day was very arduous and monotonous, the word subjection came alive. The word defiance was also given a form. As I mentioned above, living in a site like the Spinnerei, you often find yourself in a spiritual isolation. This environment created a fertile ground to produce an artwork for the Berengaria project that genuinely approaches and understands her life. So this is how my painting Berengaria, Queen of Loneliness, was inspired. Berengaria was a queen that experienced subjection, defiance, and isolation. In my mind, she needed this big window, which is in the background of the painting, in order for her to connect with the outside world, to temporarily feel peace and hope. This window may have been her way out. Berengaria belongs to our heritage and accompanies Cyprus's history. So is the Baumwollspinnerei for Leipzig and Germany. the building which carries a nation's history, a factory that was transformed and given a second life that is drastically different in purpose from the first. An old spinning mill which became a formative, integrative, and social place. Germany's core of art.
A tumultuous history is linked to the Limassol castle, beginning with the arrival of Richard the Lionheart, who had conquered the island from the Byzantine ruler Isaac Comnenus 1184 to 1191. He later sold the island to the Templar Knights, and after only a year was acquired by Guy de Lusignan, becoming a feudal kingdom under the House of Lusignan. Our feeling of space, the ability to see beyond the shell and what it represents, give us the ability to alter its image. The abandoned Berengaria village left echoes of life and fragile memories which have inspired Regal Boundary by Demosthenes Mikhail. It is an interpretation of its introverted character and what it held within. Berengaria village stretched in an area of 10,000 square meters on the south side of Polemidia in the Limassol region. It was built during 1952 to 1953 and was inhabited from 1954 until 2000. The Berengaria village was considered a retained site for use by British families working in the sovereign base area of the island. The village comprised of a total of 194 housing units and a number of miscellaneous buildings, such as educational facilities, recreational facilities, and other ancillary buildings. In addition, it boasted 3 swimming pools, restaurants, cleaning facilities, various sports courts, and public squares. It was completely independent on infrastructure from the Republic, as is the case with the sovereign base areas, with provision of raised water tanks for the settlement, equipped with its own electricity, water supply, and sewage networks, its own biological sewage treatment station, and road network. How we perceive the image of a location has everything to do with psychology and ethics. Ours, those who came before us, and those who will follow. We are unaware of how much our actions can affect space. Graffiti left by visitors in the abandoned Berengaria Hotel and their unlikely relation have inspired Berengaria by Cristina Scarpari, an interpretation of the heritage left behind by forming the center stage of a fiesta dedicated to degradation. The Berengaria Hotel in Prodromos, also known as the Hotel of Kings, was built in 1927 in the village of Prodromos on the mountain range of Troodos. The hotel's initial structure covered a total of 4,980 square meters, while the premises cover around 26,520 square meters of land. The proprietor, Mr. Ioannis Kokalos, had a vision of creating a mountain resort in his village and commissioned architect Henry Walter Clark. Construction works began in 1927, and until 1931, many building issues arose, such as a shortage in material due to the world shortage of the period and heavy winters of the region, often causing damages to the structure. The hotel is a two-story V-shaped building with the main entrance located in the central core of the structure and two wings which grow wider as they outstretch. The edifice is made up of reinforced concrete, and the walls are built with stone sourced from the mountains in the region, while the roof is topped with shingles. Neither the village nor the region had a provision of electricity at the time the hotel was due to open its doors to guests, so generators were brought in. Being the only structure with its resident generator and electricity facilities, this assisted the early power supply for the rest of village of Prodromos. Other than the psychological interpretation, there is also the aesthetic approach to space and location, which is derived through the sensory experience when making sense out of the world around us. The concept of good form is a result of sensory experiences and interpretation of their most favorable conjecture. In short, a location may not only be pleasant to us in a sensory way, but also through pleasant situations that we may have experienced there. A postcard from the Hotel Berengaria depicting dreamy holidays and a letter containing the preparation process has inspired expectations of leisure by Theopistis Stylianou Lambert. The hotel's doors opened officially on June 10, 1931, and it has hosted and entertained prestigious guests such as Farouk of Egypt, Ezra Weizmann, Archbishop Makarios, Sir Winston Churchill, the Duke of Marlborough, and the English Governor of Cyprus, Sir Ronald Storrs, to name a few. Essentially, the structures in our built environment are confessions of the lifestyle that unfolds in and around them, of dispositions that are encouraged and preserved in us as users. They speak to us of visions of happiness. What we choose to do with that is our own interpretation of its identity. That is why the concept of creating beautiful structures is believed to have the power to bring us closer to the divine, as a way to achieve perfection, perhaps. The identity of location is directly associated with the interpretation we develop about it. One might say that the description we give a certain location is its biography. Iris Nibbering, as part of her thesis for her master's degree in human geography, headed a research study as to how Cypriot youths experienced the southern urban space of walled Nicosia, and consequently examines what Berengarias of Navarre testimonials could have been in the medieval city. For some, walking alone isn't the same path. It feels different, as there is time for a closer look at things. The comfort of a place can come with the recognition of things you know. It can lead the way. Berengaria could have looked for certain landmarks similar to what she knew from 800 years ago. The sound of the church bells, the warmth of the stones, the smell of sand, certain plants, or food, or the smell of garbage and still water after a hot day. Maybe she would stroll along the walls of Nicosia. Even though their current form is from a later architectural style, the fortress might occur to her as a promise of security. Defining a form changes when the process of human behavior changes, which is directly related with the psychological aspect of interpreting its particular shape. When our expectations of space differentiate, our perception changes as our cognitive function and spatial behavior. In consequence, structures such as the buildings of our thematology do not just change through space and time, both visually and in relation to location. Our perception or image of them changes as well. Every living thing, including locus, which is an ever-evolving and transforming entity, reaches a point where it becomes decayed. But how does one distinguish the point where that change occurs? Using basic principles and concepts that make up the identity of location and architecture in psychological sociological terms, let us examine how they apply to the three examples of structures mentioned. Graphic rendition. The ability and power of location to create intense imagery. The decay in a village left abandoned to rot. The atmosphere in a legendary hotel. The imposing figure of a monument. The impressions in our heads amplify with each sequence of images. Density of reality. The degree of fluctuation which makes location seem real or dreamlike, its literal image or some distortion of it. The legend of a foreign princess and her role in creating history in a small Mediterranean island echoes through the walls of the Limassol castle. Or is that the tormented sounds of prisoners and their tragic reality?
Όταν αποδέχτηκα την πρόσκληση να συμμετάσχω στο The Berengaria Project, φυσικά επέλεξα την ίδια τη Βασίλισσα σαν σημείο αναφοράς. Και ήταν ξεκάθαρο εξ αρχής ότι θα έφτιαχνα ένα κόσμημα βασιλικό. Ταυτόχρονα όμως, γεννήθηκαν και πολλά ερωτήματα. Τι κόσμημα θα ήταν αυτό? Πώς θα δήλωνε το συγκεκριμένο κόσμημα ότι άνοιγε στη Βερενγάρια και όχι ως οποιαδήποτε άλλη βασίλισσα? Ποια ήταν η Βερενγάρια? Μπορούσε ένα βασιλικό κόσμημα να υποδηλώνει παράλληλα υποταγή και περιφρόνηση, όπως ήταν η κατεύθυνση που έδωσαν οι διοργανωτές? Μπορούσαν όλα αυτά να συνυπάρχουν σε ένα κόσμημα το οποίο θα έφερε το στίγμα της δικής μου δουλειάς? Ξεκίνησα την έρευνα σε ιστορικές πηγές για τη Βασίλισσα Βερενγάρια. Φυσικά έψαξα πρώτα για εικόνες, αλλά δεν βρήκα κάτι ουσιαστικό. Αντίθετα, οι αφηγήσεις χρονογράφου, αν και αλληλοσυγκρουόμενες σε αρκετές περιπτώσεις, μου έδωσαν το υλικό που με βοήθησε. Πρώτο ήταν το ατύχημα που συνέβη στο πλοίο που τη μετέφερε από την Ισπανία στα Ιεροσόλυμα για να συναντήσει τον αραγωνιαστικό της Ριχάρδο και να τελέσουν το γάμο τους. Μια θαλασσοταραχή στα νυχτά της Κύπρου αναγκάζει τη Βασίλισσα να αποβιβαστεί στη Λεμεσό και τον Λεοντόκαρδο να έρθει να καταλάβει το νησί και να την ελευθερώσει και να την υφευθεί. Δεύτερο στοιχείο ήταν η γενική εικόνα ότι η Βερενγάρια, παρότι βασίλισσα, δεν έζησε μια ευτυχισμένη και λαμπερή ζωή. Ο Λεοντόκαρδος πολύ συχνά την άφηνε μόνη με την αδερφή του για να ηγηθεί μαχών και πολέμων. Παιδιά δεν αποκτήσαν ποτέ, ενώ ο Λεοντόκαρδος πέθανε 7 μόλις χρόνια μετά το γάμο. Επίσης, δεν υπάρχουν στοιχεία στην ιστορία που να επιβεβαιώνουν ότι αυτό που έφερε μαζί τους δύο νέους ήταν ο έρωτας και η αγάπη. Σκιαγραφείται μάλλον η πιθανότητα να επρόκειτο για ένα γάμο πολιτικών σκοπιμοτήτων και οικονομικών συμφερόντων. Ούτε πλούτη πολλά έτυχε να γευτεί η Βερενγάρια. Σύνταξη βασίλισσας κατάφερε να εξασφαλίσει χρόνια μετά το θάνατο του Λεοντόκαρδου και ύστερα από πολλές εκ μέρους της διεκδικήσεις. Άρα ήταν ένα πρόσωπο που έζησε μοναξιά και ταλαιπωρίες. Με αυτά ξεκίνησα να δημιουργώ μια δική μου μυθοπλασία. Το βασιλικό κόσμημα βρέθηκε στο βυθό της θάλασσας της Κύπρου μέσα σε μια κόσμηματοθήκη η οποία είχε χρυσή επιγραφή με το όνομα Berengaria di Navarre. Πιθανότατα έπεσε από τις αποσκευές της βασίλισσας την ώρα της θαλασσοταραχής. Δεν ήταν ένα κόσμημα μόνο, αλλά 4. 4 χρυσά δαχτυλίδια με πολύτιμους λίθους και το κάθε ένα Είχε πάνω του δεμένη κορδέλα που έγραφε μία λέξη. Οι 4 λέξεις ήταν amor, αγάπη, sapientia, σοφία, divitae, πλούτος, gloria, δόξα. Ιστορικοί και αρχαιολόγοι, μετά από έρευνες πολλών χρόνων και μελέτη των ελάχιστων πηγών, κατέληξαν στο εξής συμπέρασμα. Τα δαχτυλίδια άνοιγαν σίγουρα στη βασίλισσα Βερενγκάρια, η οποία τα πήρε κρυφά από την υπόλοιπη οικογένεια, φεύγοντας για το ταξίδι προς τα Ιεροσόλυμα. Σύμφωνα με την οικογενειακή παράδοση, κάθε παιδί στην ενηλικίωσή του διάλεγε ένα από τα 4 δαχτυλίδια και μαζί όριζε τον άξονα πάνω στον οποίο επέλεγε να κινηθεί η ζωή του. Η Βερενγκάρια όμως δεν ήξερε ποιο να διαλέξει. Της φάνηκαν και τα 4 υπέροχα. Τα ήθελε όλα. Γι' αυτό πήρε και τα 4 και τα έκρυψε στις αποσκευές της. Η μητέρα της, όταν κατάλαβε ότι τα δαχτυλίδια έλειπαν από το σπίτι, πικράθηκε πολύ, γιατί ήξερε ότι η κόρη της δεν θα έβρισκε την ευτυχία στη ζωή της. Ακόμα και όταν ακολούθησε ο γάμος με τον περιβόητο βασιλιά, η μητέρα δεν καθησυχάστηκε. Ενστικτωδώς, προαισθανόταν πως η ζωή της Βερενγκάρια, αφού δεν ορίστηκε από μια ξεκάθαρη επιλογή, θα σημαδευόταν από υποταγή και περιφρόνηση. Αφού τέλειωσα την ιστορία, ξεκίνησα να σχεδιάζω και να κατασκευάζω τα ευρήματα στον βυθό της θάλασσας. Ένα παλιό ξύλινο κουτί που το προκάλεσα περισσότερη φθορά, έχοντας το βυθισμένο σε αλατόνερο για 1 μήνα περίπου, χρυσά δαχτυλίδια που να αναδεικνύουν τους πολύτιμους λίθους και τον συμβολισμό του καθενός. Κόκκινο για την αγάπη, άχρωμη σφαίρα για τη σοφία, μπλε για τη δόξα, κίτρινο για τον πλούτο. Και στο τέλος, μπήκαν τα υλικά που χρησιμοποιώ και επεξεργάζομαι τα τελευταία χρόνια για τα κοσμήματα που φτιάχνω. Πέρα από τα πολύτιμα μέταλλα, χρησιμοποιώ jasmonite, σκόνη πορσελάνης και καλούπι από σφουγγάρι. Με στόχο να δώσω το προσωπικό μου στοιχείο και την εντύπωση της υποθαλάσσιας χλωρίδας.
For nearly 400 years, the island often suffered raids by Genoese, Egyptians, Mamluks, and Saracens. The island had fallen under Venetian rule in 1489 and subsequently under the Ottomans when they attacked and destroyed Limassol in 1538, opening as a result the gateway to the entire island and its complete capture in 1571. The castle had seen its fair share of destruction due to the raids and earthquakes that devastated the island. Associative rendition, the subconscious quality of location that connects forms to other subjective context and its ability to transfer memory. When looking at photographs from the Hotel Berengaria, one cannot help but be transferred to its golden age, where it was the center of social activity. Then again, another may be inclined to be transferred to a Kubrick-like dimension like the hotel from The Shining. Renowned for its French and Cypriot cuisine and its excellent hospitality, it was also famous for its Nights Club, which served as a reference point not only for locals but for the entire island, with music, dancing, and beauty pageants. The hotel's premises included playgrounds for children, a tennis court, and other recreational areas, establishing it as one of the most prestigious and glamorous hotels in the Eastern Mediterranean of the period. Readability. Depending on spatial syntax, the cohesion and placement of form and its ability to convey information and/or messages defines how we navigate through. A stop sign, the unnatural boundary of barbed wire and repetition, once where the Berengaria village existed, is an image that transfers more information than any verbal description will. It underlines what the prohibitive signs say. The housing units had a life expectancy of approximately 10 years, and in several cases the materials used in the construction contained asbestos. Asbestos, while encased in other materials, such as prefabricated concrete, is not a health hazard, but when released into the atmosphere can be harmful to humans if inhaled. In 2000, the village was closed and its inhabitants were transferred to Episkopi Garrison. The abandoned camp lay open to vandalism, and in its dilapidated states, local authorities raised concern about harmful effects of released asbestos to residents of neighboring areas. Imposition factor: the force with which form can be imposing. The castle has transformed into a landmark of the skyline in Limassol. It has merged into its horizon next to skyscrapers and coastal structures. Memory: it is made up by elements that resist damage and change in time. Even in a state of complete abandonment, taken over by nature, the Hotel Berengaria maintains the memory of what it used to be, and never seems to fade as long as its shape maintains its form. Internal political turmoil on the island could not but also affect the smooth running of the hotel. During the Oga uprising of 55-59 to end the British colonial rule, the hotel remained closed. In 1959, the owner Ioannis Kokalos passes away and his 3 children inherit the Berengaria Hotel. In 1960, with the establishment of the Cyprus Republic, the Cyprus Tourism Organization introduces new legislation on upgrading tourist facilities within the sector, creating antagonism amongst hotels all over the island. The hotel desperately needed an upgrade if it were to compete. In 1967, Fotis Kolakidis was commissioned to design a swimming pool and its relating structures for the hotel. It followed the same V-shape as the hotel building, but was shaded by the main structure and subsequently standing at an altitude of 1,380 meters above sea level. The water was always cold, even during the hot summer months. The Berengaria Hotel's declining course began around 1970, and in 1984 the hotel closed its doors to the public once and for all. It is considered one of the most contemporary monuments of Cyprus, but unfortunately was never considered or listed as such by the authorities. The hotel had been abandoned long before the Cyprus Tourism Organization padlocked it. Abandoned rooms that seemed to have been evacuated in a hurry, personal items strewn about, and disarrayed furniture only enhanced the legends that claimed the hotel was cursed or indeed even haunted. Sensitivity: the ability of location to emotionally stimulate an individual. Even after the harmful materials have been removed from the Berengaria village, even over the enclosures and demolished structures, the sense of its former life remains, the daily life of its inhabitants. Even though memory may fade, the imprints of life remain: feelings, sounds, smells. The Berengaria village was eventually passed on to the Republic of Cyprus. Recently, the government had assigned the asbestos removal and the demolition of the settlement to a specialist contractor. All structures, including housing, common use buildings, and miscellaneous infrastructure, such as the sewage treatment station, were torn down and removed. All harmful materials, such as asbestos, were handled and commissioned as per the health and safety regulations. The area is now ready to be reborn. New plans are being considered for the development of the area to accommodate new facilities for the Technical University of Cyprus, the BAC. Sanctity: a quality of location mainly associated with psychological and spiritual ascension that clearly differentiated from any other unholy, common, or lowly place. The myth of kings that passed, historical events that took place, the structural materials and their energy, standing tall against the wear and tear of time, climbing up the castle steps reverently. The castle was rebuilt in 1590 by the Ottomans to its original form, but smaller in size. New structures had been added, such as 2 oblong halls on the ground floor. The thickness of the walls increased to 2 meters, and high walls enclosed the perimeter. It was used as a prison up to the 1940s under British rule. After that, the castle was handed over to the Department of Antiquities, where it was used as the District Archaeological Museum from 1948 to 1964. For a brief period during the bicommunal riots in 1963 to 1964, it was granted to the National Guard for safekeeping. Since 1987, it houses the medieval collection of the Cyprus Museum, showcasing impressive casts, sculptures, tombstones, and the remains of what is believed to be a soldier from the Nicosia siege by the Ottomans in 1570. Familiarization. The identity of location is made up of certain principles and concepts. Outlining its form or setting its boundaries serves as an associative function to us. By setting up boundaries, we specify our relationship with location, making it familiar to us in form and context. The degree with which we formulate and comprehend boundaries is a vital function in perceiving space. By violating those boundaries, as evident by the graffiti left behind in the Hotel Berengaria, or by tales of trespassers trying to catch the alleged ghosts within its walls, leads to experiencing space in a different way, even manipulating it. A woman that had died under mysterious conditions, a desperate man that took his own life, a murder and a sealed-off room, a cursed mural in the night's club depicting the flames of hell, are only a few of the legends that bind the hotel with its tragic destiny. The hotel's swimming pool is also bound to legends of haunting. The owner's son was said to have taken his own life and drowned in it, or that a figure of a woman is seen emerging from the pool each night, drawing trespassers and vandals, trying to catch a glimpse of these mysterious stories. Symbolism, the image's ability to transfer specific or abstract messages. Through the Berengaria project, each creative gave their own rendition and description of the identity of the structures that echoed the story of a queen forgotten in time by transcending physical dimensions. The collective Fihi Psi heritage design, under which the Berengaria project was initiated, delved into the core of each identity and interpreted these meanings through the triptych King, Hotel, Camp.